Americans had gotten used to how there was no fatal accidents, at least among commercial aviation, in the last 15 years until Wednesday. And so the American Airlines helicopter collision, that was the deadliest in 2 decades.
Now, back to the news of another fatal air crash in the US when a mid-size air ambulance plane carrying a sick child and 5 others crashed last night shortly after taking off from northeast Philadelphia airport. The mayor's office has announced that all 6 people on board the plane were sadly killed in the crash, including a mother and her daughter. The governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, spoke just after the tragedy.
The mayor preaches about one Philly. She talks about a unified approach to governing every day. What you're seeing here is a unified response to an awful aviation disaster. For as awful as that aviation disaster was, tonight we also saw the best of Philly. We saw neighbor helping neighbor. We saw Pennsylvanians looking out for one another. I want to reaffirm the comments the mayor said about all of the different agencies working together, and I want to especially thank and salute Philly Fire and Philly Police, who did an extraordinary job this evening. We know that there will be loss in this region, and we want to offer our thoughts and our serious prayers for those who are grieving at this moment.
6 people who were injured on the ground were admitted to hospital, 3 of whom have been released. I'm joined now by Daniel Lipman, a White House reporter for Politico, to give us the latest. Good afternoon, Daniel.
Thanks for having me.
Very nice to have you. Can you give us the latest updates?
So one of the updates is that one person, sadly, on the ground was killed. There were many people who were injured and had to go to hospital, including one in stable condition. But it really comes kind of, shaking Americans' confidence in the aviation system, since the Learjet is not that's a common private jet. That's not just like a Cessna plane. And the fact that it went down in downtown Philadelphia is shocking to Americans who had just been recovering from the American Airlines crash on Wednesday.
Okay, so just to confirm that sadly one person on the ground has died. Is that news that's broke recently?
Yeah, I think that was earlier today from city officials, and so, but other people went into hospital, and thankfully, not more people were on the ground were not killed, as can happen in these types of situations.
Can you give us a picture of how this played out?
So it took off pretty quickly, and it was en route to Missouri with a final destination in Mexico. And so the child had received care from a Philadelphia hospital and was being taken back to her home country of Mexico. And so they really don't know the cause of the crash, but it likely was a mechanical error. Because all the pilots, they have good training, and usually it's not just pilot error. And so I think that they're going to look at whether it could happen to other Learjets and do a proper safety analysis. And so the National Transportation Safety Board is going to be pretty busy over the next few months looking at both this and also the Washington, D.C. crash. You
mentioned the D.C. crash. Obviously, President Trump had plenty to say about that immediately. What has he had to say about this, if anything at all?
So far, he's not blaming DEI for this crash, and so he is. I think he's been briefed on this, but given that this was 6 people died in this crash, I would expect him to say something. But it's also the weekend, and so he is not. He's not going to hold a press conference just on this one crash. And so I think that, he was, kind of trying to reassure Americans that he's not trying to politicize every air crash that happens in America.
I mean, Josh Shapiro talked about the best of people in the area. Talk us through the local reaction to the crash and how people have come out to help each other.
There was lots of first responders, fire, police, ambulances that came to Northeast Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Fire Department has advised residents to avoid the area, not touch debris. There was one firefighter who went to the hospital because complaining of breathing issues. But of course, it's terrifying when witnesses were, it felt like an earthquake in some witnesses' perceptions, because you don't expect a private jet to just fall out of the sky and go into a crowded city neighborhood any day of the week.
I mean, yeah, that is the psychological scarring of that happening with people on the ground. I mean, in general, with these two things happening in quick succession, what has been the effect on the American psyche of how they feel about air travel?
Well, Americans had gotten used to how there was no fatal accidents, at least among commercial aviation, in the last 15 years until Wednesday. And so the American Airlines helicopter collision, that was the deadliest in 2 decades in terms of a airline crash. And so there's been so much emphasis on improving aviation safety, on tightening up the loopholes, but when Americans see the news about how most air traffic controller towers are understaffed, that doesn't inspire lots of confidence that Americans can fly safely. Even though the government, President Trump, he has said that he would take any flights. Of course, he gets to fly Air Force One, and accompanied by fighter jets, and the most well-maintained plane in the country. But he also realizes that aviation is such an important part of the American economy, and so you can't have you have to have confidence in that, and so he doesn't want to do anything to shake that confidence.
Sure. Okay, well, listen, Daniel Lipman, White House reporter for Politico, thanks very much for joining us.
An aircraft went down in the vicinity of Roosevelt Mall on Cottman Avenue, and it did occur shortly after 6 p.m. Again, we have no reports on the number of fatalities, so we are asking everyone for their thoughts and prayers for all who may have been impacted and affected by this tragedy. Several dwellings and vehicles were also impacted, and so we are urging people, particularly those families who live in the surrounding area, to please stay home if possible. If you see any debris, and those who are conducting the investigations have repeated consistently, please do not touch anything because it is still an active investigation. Just call 911, please, if you see anything. Investigators and all of our federal, state, and local partners are working as expeditiously as possible during this very difficult time.